Marcus had always been the type of neighbor who minded his own business. Living in the quiet suburban street of Maple Avenue for over 15 years, he knew everyone by name and maintained friendly relationships with most families. His daily routine was simple. Wake up at 6, jog around the block, grab coffee from the corner shop, and head to work at the local accounting firm. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in late September, when Marcus noticed something unusual while returning from his morning jog. The Thompson family's house, 3 doors down from his own, seemed unusually quiet. Mrs. Thompson's car was gone, which wasn't strange since she worked early shifts at the hospital. But what caught his attention was the broken fence panel in their backyard and scattered trash across their lawn. Marcus slowed his pace, curiosity getting the better of him. The Thompsons were meticulous about their property. Mrs. Thompson, Sarah, took pride in her garden, and her 17-year-old son, Jake, usually helped maintain the yard. The mess was completely out of character for them. As he approached closer, Marcus heard muffled voices coming from the Thompsons' garage. The large door was slightly open, just enough for someone to slip through. He recognized Jake's voice, but there were others too, voices he didn't recognize. The conversation seemed heated, with occasional laughter that didn't sound friendly. Marcus felt torn between respecting their privacy and his growing concern. The Thompsons had been good neighbors. Sarah had brought him homemade soup when he was sick with flu the previous winter, and Jake had helped him carry groceries when he sprained his ankle. They deserved the same consideration he would want for himself, but something felt wrong. The voices were getting louder, and he could hear what sounded like objects being moved around roughly. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of walking away, he quietly moved closer to the fence line, positioning himself behind the large oak tree that separated their properties. Through the gap in the fence, Marcus could see into the garage. What he saw made his blood run cold. Jake wasn't alone. He was with 3 older teenagers Marcus didn't recognize from the neighborhood. They were going through boxes, pulling out items and stuffing them into large black bags. Electronics, tools, and what looked like jewelry were being sorted into piles. The most shocking part wasn't just what they were doing, but how organized it seemed. This wasn't teenage mischief. It was systematic. Jake appeared to be directing the operation, pointing to specific items and giving instructions. Marcus realized he was witnessing a burglary, but the victim's own son was leading it. Marcus's hands trembled as he reached for his phone. Should he call Sarah first? Should he confront Jake directly? The logical part of his mind told him to call the police immediately, but his heart hesitated. Jake was just a kid, and Sarah was a single mother who had worked so hard to provide for her son after her divorce 3 years ago. As Marcus debated his next move, one of the unknown teenagers spotted him through the fence. The boy nudged Jake and pointed in Marcus's direction. Jake's face went pale when he saw his neighbor watching them. For a moment, the garage fell completely silent. Jake quickly whispered something to his companions, and they began moving faster, clearly trying to finish whatever they were doing. Marcus knew he had seconds to decide what to do next. The situation was escalating beyond a simple neighborly concern. Marcus stepped back from the fence, his heart pounding. He had witnessed something serious, and now Jake knew he had seen everything. There was no going back to pretending this never happened. The weight of the situation settled on his shoulders as he realized that his next decision would affect not just himself, but the entire Thompson family. Walking quickly back to his house, Marcus's mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Were they stealing from their own home, or had they moved on to robbing others? Was Sarah aware of what her son was doing? And most importantly, what was the right thing to do? As he reached his front door, Marcus heard the garage door at the Thompson house slam shut. The sound echoed through the quiet morning air like a warning. Whatever Jake and his friends were doing, they were now aware that someone had seen them. Marcus knew that his peaceful morning jog had just turned into something much more complicated and potentially dangerous. Marcus spent the entire day at work, unable to concentrate on his spreadsheets and client files. Every few minutes, his mind wandered back to what he had witnessed in the Thompson garage. During his lunch break, he sat in his car and stared at his phone, Sarah's contact information displayed on the screen. He had her number from the neighborhood emergency contact list they had created last year. 3 times he started to dial her number, and 3 times he stopped. What would he say? "Hi, Sarah. I saw your son stealing things from your garage this morning." The conversation seemed impossible to navigate. Sarah worked double shifts to make ends meet, and the last thing she needed was more stress in her life. By the time Marcus got home that evening, he had convinced himself to wait and see if the situation resolved itself. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe Jake was just going through a rebellious phase and would come to his senses. But as he pulled into his driveway, those hopes were quickly shattered. The Thompson house was dark except for the garage, where he could see light filtering through the windows. As Marcus walked toward his front door, he heard the same muffled voices from the morning. This time there seemed to be even more people involved. The sound of car doors slamming and engines starting came from the alley behind their house. Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of going inside his house, he walked around to his backyard and positioned himself where he could see the Thompson property clearly. What he witnessed over the next hour confirmed his worst fears. Jake and his group weren't just taking things from the Thompson house anymore. A small sedan pulled up to the alley, and 2 more teenagers got out carrying bags and boxes. They were bringing stolen items from other locations and using the Thompson garage as a storage and distribution center. Marcus watched as they sorted through electronics, tools, sports equipment, and even some furniture pieces. The operation was more sophisticated than Marcus had initially realized. Jake appeared to be running a neighborhood theft ring, and he was using his mother's house as the headquarters. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Sarah worked at the hospital saving lives while her son was stealing from their neighbors and friends. Around 10 o'clock, Marcus saw something that made his decision for him. Mrs. Chen, from 2 blocks over, appeared on his security camera app. She was posting on the neighborhood social media group about her missing laptop and tablet that had disappeared from her car that afternoon. The description matched exactly what Marcus had seen being moved through the Thompson garage. Marcus knew Mrs. Chen well. She was an elderly widow who lived alone and used her laptop to video chat with her grandchildren across the country. The thought of her being targeted by Jake's group made Marcus's stomach turn. This wasn't just teenage mischief anymore. Real people were being hurt. But before Marcus could take action, his doorbell rang. He looked through the peephole and saw Jake standing on his front porch. The teenager looked nervous but determined. Marcus's heart started racing as he realized that Jake had come to confront him about what he had witnessed. Opening the door cautiously, Marcus was greeted by Jake's forced smile.
"Hey, Mr. Rodriguez, how are you doing tonight?"
Jake's voice was casual, but Marcus could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm fine, Jake. It's pretty late for a social visit, isn't it?" Marcus kept his voice neutral, not wanting to escalate the situation. Jake shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Yeah, I know. I just wanted to talk to you about something. I think you might have seen me and some friends in the garage this morning. We were just hanging out, you know. But I wanted to make sure you didn't get the wrong idea about anything." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Jake was trying to manipulate the situation, probably hoping to convince him that nothing suspicious was happening. The teenager's attempt at damage control only confirmed that what Marcus had witnessed was serious. "I see a lot of things from my yard, Jake. Is there something specific you're worried about?" Marcus chose his words carefully, not wanting to reveal how much he actually knew. Jake's smile faltered slightly. "Not worried exactly. Just wanted to make sure we're good neighbors, you know? Sometimes people misunderstand things when they don't have all the information." The veiled threat in Jake's words wasn't lost on Marcus. The teenager was essentially warning him to keep quiet about what he had seen. But instead of intimidating Marcus, Jake's visit had the opposite effect. It confirmed that the situation was serious enough that Jake felt the need to try to silence potential witnesses. After Jake left, Marcus sat in his living room with his phone in his hands. Mrs. Chen's post about her stolen laptop was still open on his screen. He thought about Sarah, working night shifts to provide for her son, completely unaware that Jake was destroying everything she had worked for. He thought about the other neighbors who had probably been victimized and didn't even know it yet. Marcus realized that his window for easy solutions had closed. Jake's visit had made it clear that this wasn't going to stop on its own. The question was no longer whether to get involved, but how to handle a situation that was becoming more dangerous by the hour. The next morning, Marcus woke up to find his car had been vandalized. Someone had scratched deep lines along the driver's side door and smashed his side mirror. There was no note, no obvious signature, but Marcus knew exactly who was responsible. Jake's warning the night before had escalated to property damage. Standing in his driveway in his bathrobe, Marcus felt a mix of anger and fear. The message was clear: keep quiet or face consequences. But instead of intimidating him into silence, the vandalism strengthened his resolve. If Jake was willing to damage a neighbor's property to cover his tracks, there was no telling how far he might go. Marcus called in sick to work and spent the morning documenting everything. He took photos of his damaged car, wrote down detailed notes about everything he had witnessed, and researched the neighborhood social media groups for reports of recent thefts. What he found was alarming. Over the past 6 weeks, there had been more than a dozen reports of stolen items in their immediate area. Laptops taken from cars, tools missing from garages, packages disappearing from porches, and even some home break-ins when families were away. The pattern was consistent with what Marcus had observed in the Thompson garage. Most disturbing was the realization that many victims hadn't reported the thefts to police. Mrs. Chen's laptop theft was reported only on social media. Mr. Williams from the next block mentioned his missing tools in a casual conversation thread. The Jackson family had posted about someone breaking into their shed but said they weren't going to involve police since nothing too valuable was taken. Marcus understood why people weren't reporting these crimes. In a close-knit neighborhood, many residents preferred to handle things quietly rather than bring police attention to their street. They trusted that minor thefts would resolve themselves or that community awareness would be enough to prevent future incidents. Jake had been counting on this tendency, and it had allowed his operation to grow unchecked. Around noon, Marcus noticed unusual activity at the Thompson house. A moving truck had pulled into the driveway, and Jake was directing several people as they loaded items from the garage. Marcus grabbed his binoculars and watched from his bedroom window. The operation was brazen in its scope. Furniture, electronics, sports equipment, and boxes of smaller items were being loaded systematically. It looked like Jake was either moving the entire operation to a new location or preparing for a major sale. Either way, Marcus realized this might be his last chance to gather evidence. Making a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary, Marcus grabbed his phone and started recording video from his window. The footage clearly showed Jake directing the loading of items that Marcus recognized from the previous day's activities. More importantly, he could see license plates, faces, and the systematic nature of the operation. As Marcus was recording, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop watching or your house is next." Marcus's hand shook as he read the message, but he continued recording. Jake had obviously spotted him at the window and was now making direct threats. The situation had moved beyond neighborhood drama into something potentially dangerous. After the moving truck left, Marcus made copies of all his evidence and stored them in multiple locations. He uploaded the videos to a cloud storage account and emailed copies to himself at work. If something happened to him or his property, there would still be a record of what he had witnessed. That afternoon, Sarah Thompson came home from her shift at the hospital. Marcus watched from his window as she stood in her empty garage, clearly confused about where all the stored items had gone. Even from a distance, he could see her distress as she walked around the space, looking for belongings that were no longer there. Jake arrived home about an hour later, and Marcus could hear their conversation escalating into an argument, though he couldn't make out the specific words. Through the windows, he could see Jake gesturing defensively, while Sarah pointed toward the empty garage. Marcus knew this was his moment. Sarah had discovered that something was wrong, and she deserved to know the truth about what her son had been doing. But he also knew that approaching her directly might put both of them in danger if Jake felt cornered. Instead, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He picked up his phone and dialed 911. When the operator answered, Marcus took a deep breath and said, "I need to report a theft ring operating in my neighborhood. I have video evidence and detailed information about ongoing criminal activity." The operator asked for his address and began taking down the initial details. As Marcus provided the information, he looked out his window toward the Thompson house. Sarah was still in the garage, examining the empty space where her belongings used to be. Jake was nowhere to be seen. Marcus knew that once he filed this police report, there would be no going back. The quiet suburban street would never be the same, and his relationship with the Thompson family would be forever changed. But as he thought about Mrs. Chen missing her laptop, about all the neighbors who had been victimized, and about Sarah working multiple jobs while her son destroyed their family's reputation, Marcus knew he was making the right choice. The operator told him that officers would be dispatched to take his statement and collect the evidence. As Marcus hung up the phone, he realized that within hours, Sarah would learn the truth about what her son had been doing. And when she did, she would undoubtedly blame the messenger who had exposed Jake's crimes. 2 police officers arrived at Marcus's house within 30 minutes of his call. Detective Maria Santos and Officer James Wright listened carefully as Marcus explained what he had witnessed over the past 3 days. He showed them the videos he had recorded, the photographs of his vandalized car, and the detailed notes he had compiled about the neighborhood thefts. Detective Santos reviewed the evidence with professional interest. "This is exactly the kind of information we need," she told Marcus. "We've been getting scattered reports about thefts in this area, but nothing concrete enough to build a case. Your documentation ties everything together." Officer Wright examined the videos on Marcus's phone. The footage clearly shows organized criminal activity. With the license plates and faces visible, we should be able to identify most of the participants. He paused the video on a clear shot of Jake directing the loading operation. "Are you certain this is the homeowner's son?" Marcus nodded reluctantly. "Jake Thompson. His mother Sarah works at General Hospital. She's a single parent who has no idea what's been happening." The weight of betraying a neighbor's family sat heavily on Marcus's shoulders, but he knew the alternative was worse. Detective Santos explained the next steps. "We'll need to obtain search warrants for the Thompson property and any other locations we can identify from your evidence. We'll also need you to provide a formal written statement." She looked at Marcus seriously. "I have to warn you that once we move forward with this investigation, your involvement will likely become known to the family and the community." As the officers prepared to leave, Marcus asked the question that had been bothering him all day. "What happens to Jake? He's still just 17. "Juvenile charges are handled differently," Detective Santos explained. "But given the scope of what you've documented, this isn't simple mischief. Organized theft, receiving stolen property, and possibly burglary charges could result in serious consequences, even for a minor." After the police left, Marcus tried to return to his normal evening routine, but concentration was impossible. He kept checking his windows, expecting to see police cars surrounding the Thompson house at any moment. But the street remained quiet, and life continued as if nothing had changed. Around 8 o'clock, Marcus's doorbell rang. His stomach dropped when he saw Sarah Thompson standing on his porch. She looked exhausted and confused, still wearing her hospital scrubs from the day shift. Her eyes were red, suggesting she had been crying. "Marcus, I'm sorry to bother you," Sarah began, her voice shaky. "But I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me." She took a deep breath. "Have you seen anything unusual around my house lately? Items being moved or people coming and going?" Marcus felt trapped between his desire to help Sarah and his obligation to let the police handle the investigation. "Sarah, you look upset. Is everything okay?" "Nothing is okay," she replied, her composure beginning to crack. "Half of our stored belongings are missing from the garage. Family photos, my grandmother's china, tools that belonged to my ex-husband. Jake claims he doesn't know anything about it, but something doesn't add up." The pain in Sarah's voice was heartbreaking. Marcus could see that she suspected her son but couldn't bring herself to fully accept the possibility. "Have you considered calling the police?" he asked gently. Sarah shook her head. "I can't call the police on my own son based on suspicions. But if someone else had seen something, if there was evidence of a break-in or strangers in the area..." She looked directly at Marcus. "I know you're usually up early. I thought maybe you might have noticed something." Marcus realized this was Sarah's way of seeking confirmation of her worst fears, while maintaining hope that Jake wasn't responsible. She wanted someone else to provide the evidence that would force her to face the truth about her son. "Sarah, I think you should file a police report about the missing items," Marcus said carefully. "Even if it turns out to be a misunderstanding, you deserve to know what happened to your belongings." Before Sarah could respond, Jake appeared behind her on the porch. "Mom, what are you doing here?" His voice was sharp with anxiety. When he saw Marcus, his expression darkened. Oh, I see. Having a nice chat with the neighbor? Jake, I was just asking Marcus if he had seen anything unusual around our house, Sarah explained, clearly trying to diffuse the tension she could feel building. Jake stepped closer to Marcus, his body language becoming aggressive. And what did our helpful neighbor have to say? The sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable. Marcus felt the situation spiraling toward confrontation. Jake obviously suspected that Marcus had contacted authorities, and Sarah was caught in the middle without understanding the full scope of what was happening. I told your mother that she should report the missing items to police, Marcus said evenly. It's the right thing to do when property goes missing. Jake's face flushed with anger. Maybe people should mind their own business instead of making trouble for families who are already struggling. Sarah looked confused by the hostile exchange. Jake, what's wrong with you? Marcus is just trying to be helpful. Helpful? Jake laughed bitterly. Yeah, he's being real helpful, all right. He turned to Marcus with undisguised hostility. Some neighbors know how to keep their mouths shut about things that don't concern them. Others apparently don't. The threat in Jake's words was clear to Marcus, even if Sarah didn't understand the subtext. Marcus realized that Jake knew exactly what was coming and was making one last attempt to intimidate him into silence. Jake Thompson, that's enough, Sarah said firmly. Apologize to Marcus right now. But Jake was beyond listening to his mother. Why don't you ask your neighbor what he's been doing while you're at work, Mom? Ask him how helpful he's really been to our family. As the confrontation escalated on his front porch, Marcus could see police cars turning onto their street in the distance. The investigation was about to become very public, and Sarah was about to learn the devastating truth about her son's activities. 3 police cars turned onto Maple Avenue with their lights flashing but sirens off. Sarah noticed them first, her face showing confusion as the vehicles approached their section of the street. Jake's expression shifted from anger to panic as he realized what was happening. Mom, we need to go home right now, Jake said urgently, grabbing Sarah's arm and trying to pull her away from Marcus's porch. But Sarah wasn't moving. She stood frozen, watching the police cars park in front of their house. Why are the police here? She whispered, the color draining from her face. Detective Santos approached Marcus's porch with Officer Wright and 2 additional officers. Mr. Rodriguez, we have the search warrants, she announced professionally. Then she noticed Sarah and Jake standing there. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Detective Santos. We need to speak with you and your son about some missing property in the neighborhood. Sarah looked back and forth between the detective and Marcus, pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. Missing property? But I'm the one whose things are missing. I don't understand what this has to do with Jake. Jake tried one more time to deflect. This is harassment. We haven't done anything wrong. Mr. Rodriguez has been spying on us and making false accusations. Detective Santos stepped forward calmly. Jake Thompson, you're not under arrest, but I need you to come with us for questioning. Mrs. Thompson, we have a warrant to search your garage and any outbuildings on your property. The reality of the situation finally hit Sarah with full force. She turned to Marcus with an expression of shock and betrayal. You called the police on my son? You reported Jake? Marcus felt the weight of Sarah's accusation, but he stood his ground. I reported criminal activity that I witnessed. I have video evidence of stolen property being stored and distributed from your garage. Video evidence? Sarah's voice cracked. You were recording my family? Jake exploded with rage. I told you this guy was trouble. He's been stalking us, watching our every move, trying to destroy our family. That's enough, Officer Wright said firmly, stepping between Jake and Marcus. Jake, you need to calm down and come with us quietly. Sarah watched in disbelief as her son was led toward the police cars. This has to be a mistake, she said to Detective Santos. Jake would never steal anything. He's a good kid who's had some problems since his father left, but he's not a criminal. Detective Santos spoke gently but clearly. Mrs. Thompson, we have extensive evidence of organized theft activity centered at your property. Your son was documented directing the operation and storing stolen goods in your garage. As the reality sank in, Sarah's shock transformed into fury directed at Marcus. How dare you destroy my family like this? You could have come to me first. You could have given Jake a chance to explain. Marcus felt the weight of every word, but he knew he had made the right choice. Sarah, I tried to find another way. But this wasn't just teenage mischief. Jake was running a theft ring that victimized our neighbors. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Williams, the Jackson family, they all had property stolen. You don't know that Jake was involved in any of that, Sarah shot back. You just assumed the worst about a 17-year-old boy. Detective Santos intervened with evidence that shattered Sarah's remaining hopes. Mrs. Thompson, we have video footage of your son directing the loading of stolen property from your garage. We also have testimony from several of his associates who were arrested this morning at other locations. Sarah staggered backward as if physically struck. Other arrests? How many people are involved in this? The investigation is ongoing, Detective Santos replied. But we believe this operation affected at least 15 families in the immediate area over the past 2 months. As police officers began searching the Thompson property, neighbors started emerging from their houses to see what was happening. The quiet suburban street had become the center of a major criminal investigation, and everyone wanted answers. Mrs. Chen appeared at Marcus's side, having walked over from her house 2 blocks away. Is this about my stolen laptop? She asked hopefully. Marcus nodded. The police have evidence about a lot of thefts in the neighborhood. Your laptop was probably part of what was taken. Sarah overheard the conversation and turned to Mrs. Chen with tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If Jake really did this, I will make sure everything is returned to you. Mrs. Chen's expression softened when she saw Sarah's distress. You couldn't have known, dear. These kids can be very secretive about what they're doing. But Sarah wasn't consoled. She turned back to Marcus with renewed anger. You still should have come to me first. You should have given me a chance to handle this as his mother before involving the police. Marcus understood Sarah's pain, but he also thought about all the victims who deserved justice. Sarah, Jake threatened me when he realized I had seen something. He vandalized my car to try to silence me. This wasn't a situation that could be resolved with a family conversation. Threatened you? Sarah looked genuinely surprised. Jake threatened you? Officer Wright confirmed Marcus's account. We have the threatening text message and photos of the property damage. Your son was trying to intimidate Mr. Rodriguez into staying quiet about what he had witnessed. As more evidence emerged, Sarah's anger began shifting from Marcus to the devastating realization of what her son had become. But the damage to her relationship with Marcus and her trust in her neighbors had already been done. The community that had once felt safe and supportive now felt fractured and suspicious. The search of the Thompson property would continue for hours, and the full scope of Jake's operation would eventually be revealed. But for Sarah, the nightmare was just beginning as she faced the reality that her son was not the person she thought she knew. 3 weeks after Jake's arrest, the full scope of the theft ring had been revealed. Police recovered stolen property worth over $40,000 from various locations throughout the city. Jake had been running a sophisticated operation that involved 8 other teenagers and had victimized more than 30 families across 3 neighborhoods. Marcus stood in his kitchen, reading the morning newspaper article about the case resolution. Jake had accepted a plea deal that included restitution to victims, community service, and supervised probation until his 18th birthday. The other members of the ring faced similar consequences, with 2 older participants receiving jail time. The neighborhood had slowly begun returning to normal, but the scars remained visible. Security cameras had appeared on houses that never had them before. Neighbors who used to leave garage doors open while working in their yards now kept everything locked. The sense of trust that had defined Maple Avenue for years had been fundamentally damaged. Marcus's relationship with Sarah had never recovered. She had moved out of the neighborhood 2 weeks ago, unable to face the daily reminders of her son's crimes and the neighbors who now knew their family's story. Before leaving, she had left a letter in Marcus's mailbox. I understand why you did what you did, she had written. I know Jake's actions were wrong, and I know you were trying to protect people. But I cannot forgive you for not giving me a chance to handle this differently. My son will carry this record for the rest of his life, and our family has been destroyed. I hope you can live with knowing that your choice to call the police instead of talking to me first changed everything for us. Marcus had read the letter dozens of times, each reading bringing a fresh wave of guilt and second-guessing. Had he been too quick to involve authorities? Could a conversation with Sarah have prevented the same outcome, with less collateral damage to their family? But then Marcus would remember Mrs. Chen's joy when her laptop was returned, containing irreplaceable photos of her late husband and videos from her grandchildren. He would think about the Jackson family getting back their son's baseball equipment that had been stolen just before the season started. The Williams family had recovered tools that represented Mr. Williams's entire livelihood as a handyman. Detective Santos had stopped by Marcus's house the previous week to provide an update on the case. "You should know that your decision to report this probably prevented much more serious crimes," she had told him. "We found evidence that Jake's group was planning to expand into home invasions. They had been watching houses and documenting family schedules." The detective's words provided some comfort, but Marcus still struggled with the personal cost of his decision. Sarah's anger at him had been echoed by some other neighbors who felt he should have handled the situation differently. The neighborhood social media groups had been filled with debates about whether Marcus had done the right thing. Mrs. Chen had become one of Marcus's strongest supporters during the controversy. "You saved our neighborhood from much worse," she had told anyone who would listen. "That young man was out of control and his mother couldn't see it. Sometimes it takes an outsider to do what's necessary." As Marcus prepared for work on this particular morning, he noticed a new family moving into the Thompson house. A young couple with 2 small children were directing a moving truck in their driveway. The husband waved at Marcus when he saw him watching from his window. Marcus walked outside to introduce himself, carrying the welcome basket he had prepared the night before. The tradition of welcoming new neighbors with homemade cookies and local information had been important to him for years, and he wasn't going to let recent events change that. "Hi, I'm Marcus Rodriguez," he said, approaching the new neighbors. "I live 3 doors down. Welcome to Maple Avenue." The woman smiled warmly. "I'm Jennifer, and this is my husband, David. We're so excited to be here. Everyone we've met has been incredibly friendly." David shook Marcus's hand enthusiastically. "The realtor mentioned that this is a really safe neighborhood with good people who look out for each other." "That's exactly what we were hoping for." Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions at David's words. The neighborhood was indeed full of good people who looked out for each other, but recent events had shown that sometimes looking out for each other meant making difficult choices that not everyone would understand or appreciate. "It is a good neighborhood," Marcus replied honestly. "People here care about each other and try to do the right thing, even when it's not easy." As Marcus helped the new family carry boxes into their house, he reflected on the lessons of the past month. He had learned that doing the right thing didn't always feel good, and that protecting a community sometimes meant making choices that hurt individual families. The guilt about Sarah and Jake would probably never completely disappear, but Marcus had made peace with his decision. Standing in the driveway of the house where Jake had once run his criminal operation, Marcus realized that the neighborhood would heal and move forward. New families would bring fresh energy and hope. Children would play safely in yards where parents didn't have to worry about their property being stolen. The community would rebuild its sense of trust and security. Marcus had paid a personal price for exposing Jake's crimes, but he had also helped ensure that Maple Avenue would remain the kind of place where families could feel safe and neighbors could depend on each other. Sometimes being a good neighbor meant making the hardest choice of all, choosing the welfare of the community over personal relationships. As he walked back to his house, Marcus noticed that his damaged car had finally been repaired. The scratches were gone, the mirror had been replaced, and there were no visible reminders of the threats he had received. Like the neighborhood itself, the visible scars had healed, even if the memories remained.